All right, it is time for the Birthsign tier list. This is being remade. I already made one of these, but this is now for the Oblivion Remaster. And I'm going to talk about a lot of the changes that happened in the game, and so obviously that's going to change some of my rankings. However, the first one is not going to change. The Shadow is still F tier. And that's for a couple reasons. The Shadow gives you a greater power. Once per day, you can go invisible for a minute. And greater powers are nice, especially from Birthsigns, because they can be cast while silenced. And so there's a little bit of value there. There could be a time where you're silenced or you're out of magicka and you just need to go invisible. I don't think that's worth it, but it does have some value. It also unlocks invisibility for custom spells right away, and so you don't need to get 50 illusion to buy a custom invisibility spell. However, there is also a magical stone called the Jones Stone. When you get to 10 renown, which is a combination of your fame and infamy, you can go to the Jones Stone and activate it, and it will give you this greater power, which you can cast once per day. Now, greater powers from stones you can't cast while silenced, so you won't be able to use this to go invisible if you're silenced. However, how often does that really happen? And this allows you to make 5-second invisibility spells that are custom, which is a novice illusion spell. So you don't need to get that 50 illusion to get invisibility. And I think the Jones Stone just kind of replaces the Shadow. So the one advantage the Shadow has over a very early game Heaven Stone is that it can be cast while silent. And I think that's just too niche to give up your Birthsign for something that small. Next we have the Lady. The Lady gives you 10 endurance and 10 willpower. And with the changes to the leveling system in Oblivion Remastered, I think attributes went down in value. Because if you ever played the original Oblivion, I'll call it Classic. If you played Classic, when I played it wasn't easy to get +5s to each of your attributes. It was actually quite tedious, and I very often only got +2 or +3 to my attributes. Well now, if you're choosing 3 attributes to level, you can get +4 every single level. And by level 30, you're probably going to have all the attributes you want to 100, and that's also when the items stop scaling. Like if you want the best Spelldrinker amulet, you have to get to level 30. So I think most players will get around there. And because of that, I'm going to put the Lady at C. Now there is one change that's actually pretty valuable from the Lady, and that is willpower. Willpower is a lot more valuable than it was in Classic Oblivion, and that's because magicka regen has been redone. It's no longer based on your maximum magicka. And I'll quickly talk about the way it used to be done. It was your regen is kind of a long formula, but it was your magicka times, it was basically 0.75% plus 0.02% of your willpower. So you needed 50 willpower to get 1% of your magicka added, or every 37.5 will give you another 0.75%. It was very low. It didn't really start to make a big difference until you got to, if I started boosting my magicka, let's say, to 700 with custom spells, and I had 100 willpower, that's when your magicka regen started to go up. That would get me 19 magicka per second. And doubling my willpower would get me to 33. So that's when increasing your willpower only when you had a very high magicka pool was valuable. But before you had a high magicka pool, it was kind of worthless. Now, magicka regen's a little different. So I made this graph, and I did a bunch of testing where my X values here are willpowers that I plugged into the console, and then the Y values are how much magicka I regened per second with that willpower. And this is the best estimate, the line of best fit that goes through these points. And as you can see, it's not that good, especially at the lower points. So this is definitely an incorrect equation, but it's the best I could come up with. So the equation I have here is basically this: x to the power of 1.85 divided by 455, or you could say multiplied by this ridiculous number. Obviously, it's not exactly accurate, but it's somewhere around there. So it's exponential. Gaining more willpower as you get higher levels is definitely going up quite a bit. At 100 willpower, I was gaining 11 magicka per second. At 200, I was gaining 40. And so it was jumping up quite a bit. Even where from 1 to 2 might have doubled, and it started out kind of linear. That's because 2 to the power of 1.85, it's not jumping up that much. It wasn't really until I started getting to higher numbers that it started to show that exponential growth. But again, my equation's wrong. It doesn't fit the graph, so who really knows exactly what the equation is? Next we have, I didn't really talk about the endurance, did I? 20 health, I just don't think it's worth it. It's not even 20 health now. Endurance was nerfed. Endurance only gives you 4/3 of a health, and it's retroactive now. You guys already know this. If you're watching my video, hopefully you know the basics. Endurance used to give you 2 health per level, so the lady was 20 bonus health, and it would give you +1 on level up. Now it only gives you 4/3 of a health per point, and it gives you still 1/10 on level up, even if you level up your endurance late. It's retroactively updating that based on your endurance. So you don't have to level it up super quickly. And the problem with the lady is your attributes still cap at 100. You know, that +10 willpower and +10 endurance might get you to 100 slightly quicker, but it doesn't, by end game, it's completely worthless. You'll have them both at 100, and so that's why it's C tier, because I think attributes are just too easy to level. I think all of the attribute ones are kind of lower in ranking for me now. All right, next we have the Lord, and the Lord is very interesting. It changed from something crazy to 15% armor and 15% magic resist. And this is S tier. Try to show you why. The way armor works in Oblivion is, well, 15% is just 15% damage reduction. The cap for armor, well, it is 85%. So after 85%, gaining more shield or more armor won't do anything. But a lot of people are under the impression that if they have a full set of Daedric or glass armor, that they will be at the armor cap at 85% without any extra bonuses or augments. But if you actually look at a full set of glass or Daedric armor, glass only gives 50 armor with the shield. So that means without the shield, it's giving 35 armor, and Daedric the shield gives 22.5. So the full set is giving 75 with the shield. So let's look at, well, we'll look at glass. So that's 35 armor. I can write 35 for its base armor. Now, the multiplier below 100 skill is always below 1. So at 0 skill, it's 0.35. At 50 skill, it linearly goes up until at 100 skill, the multiplier is 1. So that would give me 35 armor. Now, light armor has a perk at 100 skill, so not at 99. At 99, this would be the armor it's giving me. But at 100 skill, it gets a perk where I would multiply it by 1.5. It gains 55%. So I could say this is equal to, say, final armor. Final armor, so my base armor was 35. My final armor is equal to my base armor times that new perk. And times, of course, my skill multiplier, but that's 1, so that's not going to change it. So a final armor in full glass at 100 is 52.5. Now there's one last multiplier. If you get Armorer to 75 skill, you can upgrade your armor to have 125 health, and that's a direct multiplier as well. So then we multiply it by 1.25, and we end up with 65.6% armor. Now, you might notice that's 20% below 85. So if you're not using the shield, even with everything maxed out in the game, you're not reaching the armor cap. You'll have to use some kind of sigil stone to reach the armor cap, or I shouldn't say sigil stone, but some kind of enchant. With the Lord, however, that's going to be this plus 15, which is quite a big bonus to health. So if you look up here, at 70 armor, if I have 100 health, well, I'm only taking 30% damage at 70 armor from physical attacks. So my effective health is going to be basically divided by 0.3, and so it's going to be 333 effective health. It's more than tripling my effective health. If I didn't have the Lord sign, meaning I only had 55 armor, so these two right here are comparing the value with the Lord sign and without. Without the Lord sign, I would have 55 armor. With, I would have 70. The 70 armor is a bonus. It's a 50% increase from 55 armor. 85 armor, well, without the Lord sign, I would have 70. That is doubling. It is a 100% increase to your effective health, because if you think about it like this, at 70 armor, you're taking 30% damage. At 85% armor, the armor cap, you're taking 15% damage. It's half. So the Lord sign, these percent increases, as you can see, they go up. Early game, if you're not wearing any armor, and for whatever reason, without the Lord sign, you would have 0. The Lord sign bumps you up to 15. It's a 17% increase to your effective health. As you gain more armor, that percentage of your effective health goes up. And or somewhere around 45 to 70 in this range, it starts to skyrocket up to doubling your effective health. So one little thing can double your effective health. It's huge. The Lord sign's really good. And it does the same for magic resist. And you might think, well, what if I pick Breton with the mundane ring? Obviously, yes, you could do that, but this would allow other builds to get the magic resistance cap or get closer to the magic resistance cap, which would work the same way. 15% magic resist works identical to 15% armor. If you have 70% magic resist, going up to 85 is going to double your effective health against spells. So the Lord is basically worth 2 sigil stones. If you're a mage, instead of needing 4 25% elemental shield sigil stones to get to 85% armor cap, you only need 3 now. And you're freed up by 15% magic resist as well. So the Lord is very powerful. It is in S tier now. Next, we have the Steed. This one's super popular. It's just not that good though. I'm going to put it below the Lady. I'm going to put it in C tier because, well, let's look at movement. So this is movement based on original classic Oblivion. This is a lot. I do a deep dive on it. You can kind of ignore everything right now, but I want you to look at, I'll highlight it in, we'll make it this pink color. This is my speed at 40. If I choose my base run speed, if I have 40 speed and 5 athletics, which is how the game would start, will be 323.3. So 323.3. That's my base. If I use the Steed sign, this would go up to 60, and it goes up to 347. We can do equals 347.7 divided by this. Oops, I missed. Divided by that. And you can see it's about a 7.5% speed increase. Now, I have no way to test this with the remaster because I don't have these numbers in the remaster. However, from my experience in the game, it doesn't seem that different gaining 20 speed. If it is, let me know in the comments because I would love to know what speed is doing, because in general they have increased the value of attributes, but just like the Lady sign, I think it is also easier to get it to 100 just from leveling, and the Steed does not increase that cap from 100. So it's not like I can now get 120 speed, it just allows me to get to 100 a little bit earlier. And so even if speed is more movement than at 7.5%, I think that 20 is still C tier. It's not very valuable. Next, we have the Warrior, and well, that kind of does the same thing. You know, I already talked about in the Endurance being less health. Well, with Strength, the Warrior is actually the same amount of health. It's 20 health because it's 10 Strength and 10 Endurance, and together they're 2 points per attribute. Strength is not as good as people think it is. So let's look at weapon damage. This is the remaster formula for weapon damage with Strength. Now, Agility, it's been a little wonky. My testing with daggers lined up exactly like this. Agility functions exactly like Strength. But with bows, things aren't quite exactly lining up how I expected them to be. So I don't have all the answers for bows. But with Strength, with the Warrior sign, early game, you might have a weapon that does 14 base weapon damage. I believe that's like an Iron Claymore. And if I have 50 Strength, you know, maybe I chose a Nord. We'll say I chose Strength as my favorite attribute. And I have 30 blade skill. I chose it as a major skill, or maybe 35, whatever. 100 weapon durability. If I go from 55 strength to 65, I want you to look at my damage. This is the round is the 5, so the bottom one's the actual damage I do, 5.20. If I go to 65 strength, it goes to 5.45. So that 10 strength didn't even change my damage. You will not notice that. That was nothing. Gaining another 20 strength. Still, now it's rounding up to 6 at least. But that 10 strength early game is very, very, very minimal. It is not until you have high blade skill and have a strong weapon and upgrade your weapon that strength, you start to see that value in the strength. Now going from 55 to 65 is almost 2 damage. So there is value in it as you get everything else up. However, you still probably notice that's not that valuable. But by the time you get these numbers up, you'll have gained enough levels where you can just put points into strength. If you care about melee damage, you're going to put points into strength. Getting it there a little bit quicker by choosing the Warrior doesn't really seem worth it to me. So it's, again, the attributes are just not very good. Next, we have the Ritual. I think the Ritual is one people forget what it does because it's less common. The Ritual, let's find it. It lets you turn undead up to level 25 for 100 points for 30 seconds on target. Now, this is a lesser power. Now, that means you can cast it multiple times for 40 magicka. And this one, because it's a lesser power, has nothing to do with spell effectiveness. And if you know anything about this level 25 with illusion spells or turn undead, which is a conjuration spell, it's at level 25, if you have 100% spell effectiveness, it can work on any enemy in the game. So normally, if you have 95% spell effectiveness, as you get to enemies beyond level 24, you cannot turn them anymore. Turn Undead does not work on very high level wraiths, on the gloom wraiths at the end or those liches, and so it functionally, if you are wearing armor, is worthless. However, the Ritual, because it's a lesser power, this will always work and turn any undead, and it's 30 seconds on target, and it's only 40 magicka. And yes, it could be a little bit cheaper of a spell if you're a pure mage who has 100% spell effectiveness and 100 conjuration. I believe it's like 10 magica less, but you don't need any conjuration skill. You get it right away out of the gates, and you can completely negate undead with that the entire game. And this Mars gift, while not that great, having an oh crap button to heal yourself for 200 once a day isn't terrible. It could be pretty useful. So I'm going to put that one at B. It's not incredible because, well, undead are niche. It's not like every enemy is undead, but having something to just fully shut them down is pretty nice. Okay, next we have the Thief. The Thief is 10 agility, 10 speed, oh, T is down here, 10 speed, and 10 luck. This one's 30 attributes instead of 20 like the others. And I think the reason it's special is because it is 10 luck. We can actually look, so back to that weapon damage one, if we had, let's call this agility instead. So we're going to start with 50 agility, we'll say 35 blade skill, 100 weapon durability. Well, choosing, oh, we'll say 55. We picked it as a favorite attribute. As you can see, we're doing 5.2 damage, but choosing the Thief sign will bring my agility up to 65, and it gives you 40% to all of your luck above 50, which in this case, because I added 10, is plus 4 to all of my skills. So it'll be plus 4 to all of my skills invisibly, so it would act as if I have 39. And so if you notice, it actually does bring me from 5 to 6 damage. Now, it's not incredible, but it's not just improving my blade. It's not just improving my marksman. It's improving my heavy armor or my light armor, my destruction, my restoration, your alchemy. That plus 4 to all skills is plus 4 to all skills. And luck, unlike the other attributes, is just as hard to level in this as it was in classic Oblivion. You're getting at most 1 per level, and it takes 4 of your virtues. So if you pick luck, if you pick 1 luck, you're missing out on 4 attributes to other things that could be valuable. And it's just, I don't think it's ever worth it to pick luck on level ups, unless you're trying to get 100 in everything. But gaining 10 from it for free like that is pretty nice. Plus the plus 10 speed isn't worthless. You'll get that to 100 a little bit quicker, though, as you know, I don't think that's super great. Next, we have the Tower. Open average lock on target once per day. Not that great. You can pick locks. The minigame, I think, is not that difficult. Some of you might think it is, but this is also not a very difficult alteration spell. As it says, it's 40 points. It's 40 magnitude. And then there's this Tower Warden Greater Power. Reflect damage 5% once per day. 5% is just not a lot. However, it does open up reflect damage for spell making, meaning you can create a spell that has reflect damage. But if you look at this, it has a base cost of 2.5. That's not very cheap. That is pretty expensive. That's 5 times as expensive as shield. But if you're using some items that give you reflect damage, and maybe you have a short spell and you get a high mysticism, you could add 20% reflect damage for a little bit, really make it so you're not taking damage. It's very niche. I don't see myself ever using it, but you could if you want to. If you don't pick the Tower, there is a way in the Shivering Isles that maybe I'll go over someday, how to get reflect damage for spell making. I'm never doing that though, but maybe you would someday. Next we have the Atronach. I think I'm kind of infamous for not liking this one. So the Atronach makes it so you do not regenerate magicka. You get no magicka, but you get 150 boost to it, and you get 50% spell absorption, meaning you have a 50% chance to absorb the base magicka cost of a spell. Now, some of you might know about the telekinesis trick where, for whatever reason, telekinesis is the only spell in the game where when you cast it, you absorb it with spell absorption. So if you get 100% spell absorption, you can make a very expensive telekinesis spell and cast it, and you will always absorb the spell. And with the way spell absorption works is it absorbs the base magicka cost. And if you've watched my other videos about any of my Magic School deep dives, you know that at 100 skill, your spells cost 20% of the base cost. This means that if you have a base cost spell of 100, at 100 mysticism, telekinesis will only cost 20. So you will spend 20 magicka, and it will restore 100, which is basically broken. So people do really value this because they use that telekinesis thing. I think that's an exploit because I don't think it's meant to work that way. If you've ever played Skyrim and got the Atronach Standing Stone and then used Conjuration, it has a 50% chance to actually absorb your own summons when you cast them. Like you try to summon a Flame Atronach and it just doesn't work and your magicka just comes back. I think that's just sloppy code and Bethesda messing up and then the remaster just deciding to leave it in because it was a fun, quirky thing. If you're doing that, I would put this at a low S. I still don't like it because honestly, stunted magicka is just so tedious. I know people are like, well, it's not that hard. I can go and farm a million flax seeds, but I think adding tedium to the game is boring, and it is actually a huge downside. People will very much play it down because late game it's not a big deal, but early and mid game I think it is a very big deal. Not regenerating magicka is not fun in my opinion. Now, if you like survival mode in Skyrim and you like that resource management type of play where you want save up your Welkin stones and stuff, you might really love the Atronach, but I will say this is my least favorite Birthsign to play. I do not have fun playing the Atronach. It's worth a try because maybe you're the type of player who does. It's personal preference there. So I do recommend at least trying it once if you've never done it. It's a completely different game experience. I'm really glad it's in the game for that reason, but it is not for the old knight. Okay, next we have the Serpent. The Serpent is kind of like the Shadow, where its value comes from the fact that it's a greater power. So let's go read it because nobody knows what the Serpent does. The Serpent, the only value in it is really this dispel. So you get a greater power once per day. You can cast this. So it's on touch is the damage health, 3 points for 20 seconds. It's very low, so it's just not worth anything. But it also cures poison, dispels 90 points on you, and damages your own fatigue 100. And if you go negative fatigue, you fall on the ground and until you get back up, or at least you did in Classic Oblivion. This isn't very good, but you can cast it while silenced. And so there are Gloom Wraiths in this game, and they're very annoying. They have a silence spell, and if you are a mage character, that can kind of just shut you down. And sometimes they last like 20 seconds, I think. It lasts quite a long time. The Wraiths, this Dispel 90 is enough Dispel to clear that silence. So if you do get silenced, you could use this, clear the silence. My problem with Dispel is there are so many enemies with lesser powers. Even those Wraiths, their Absorb Health is a lesser power, and that can't be dispelled. It's so difficult to know what can and cannot be dispelled. I think it's very annoying. And so I don't like the Serpent sign. And that one niche use that I can think of is just not that good. Cure Poison is useful in the Shivering Isles because a lot of those like goblins out there, the Grummites or whatever, have some powerful poisons, but you can just get Cure Poison potions or a spell. It's not very difficult. And obviously, yeah, with Argonians, depending on your race, Cure Poison might be less worthless. You should know about the Serpent Birthsign Doomstone. I'm going to link my Birthstone video in the description. That has a greater power when you're doing the Leowyn recommendation quest. It gives you an on-target paralyze for 5 seconds and puts a dot on your enemies, a once per day power. That's pretty fun, especially if you're doing master difficulty. It's nice to have that. This is either C or F. I'm going to put it as F. We'll put it above the Shadow. I don't know. Like, the idea of being able to cast something while silenced is cool, but really? Okay. Moving on, the Mage. The Mage, before, I think, was king. I think it was clearly a tier above everything in Classic Oblivion. It just was obviously the best. It was a pure 50 magicka. Early game was a massive, massive boost, percentage-wise, and even by late game, it was still a full late-game Sigil Stone worth of just a straight boost to your character. So it's very good, no downsides. It's plus 50 magicka. That's what the Mage does. Now, however, plus 50 magicka doesn't change your regen. We talked about, I think it's somewhere around this formula, even though that formula is not right. So there's only one variable there, X. X is your willpower. It has nothing to do with your max magicka at all. I tested this with 10,000 magicka, with 100 magicka. The Mage is just plus 50 extra spells to cast. Now, it's still really good. Plus, being able to cast more spells before you run out of magicka is great. The bonus magicka wasn't only for the regen, but it is very, very powerful. I like it quite a bit. I pretty much pick it on a large portion of my builds. While I think the Lord is the strongest, if you're playing Adept, I probably won't ever pick the Lord on Adept because I don't think the game is difficult enough, and it just makes you tankier. And it's not as fun of gameplay. It's kind of another reason I don't really like the Atronach. I like being in danger. I like that sense of I can die in this game, and so just maximizing my damage can be fun. That's why the Thief sign is also fun. It's just moves faster, deals more damage, luck is more damage. There's just more damage. So that is a fun thing. Where, again, I don't really pick the Ritual much either because it's... All right, I'm yapping too much. Let's move on. The Apprentice. This is why I like the Apprentice. The Apprentice, however, is not good. So the Apprentice, I love it. It's my favorite sign in the game. It gives you 100 magicka, so it's double what the Mage gives you. So it's a little bit worse than Classic because that doesn't give you any regen, but it's still 100 magicka. And it gives you 100% weakness to magic on self. And, I see a lot of people picking Breton with this and thinking, oh, I'm going to offset the downside of this by picking Breton, because Breton has 50% magic resist. Well, that gives you 50% weakness to magic and 150 bonus magicka. You could just pick a high elf with a mage sign and have a 150 bonus to magicka and only 25% weakness to elements, which doesn't give you a 50% increased duration on paralyze, on silence, or 50% magnitude on burden. Just don't pick Breton if you're picking the Apprentice, unless if it's like a role-playing thing. Obviously, you know, that's different. But if you're trying to be more optimal, that's a mistake. I would just go with the high elf anyway if you're picking the Apprentice. Or maybe you want to pick it on a non-magical race just to give them that starting bonus to magicka. They go really well with the Dunmer, because Dunmer have 75% resist fire. And so that is a separate modifier. So if you have 75% resist fire and 100% weakness to magic, well, you're taking 25% fire and you're taking 200% magic. So 0.25 times 2 is 0.5, so you'll take 50% fire damage. And so they're always multipliers, is how you got to think about resistances. Magic is just, at the end, they're multiplied together. Really fun because it's fun, again, like I said, to be in danger, to have to avoid, you have to dodge enemy shots. Is it good? No, because you can die. And, you know, in a min-maxing game, if that's what you're trying to do, the Apprentice is a terrible choice. But it's fun. I like it. So I still recommend trying it. Similar to the Atronach, maybe you hate that playstyle. Maybe you hate having to dodge spells, but it's absolutely worth it to give it a try at least once just to see if you like it. Okay, next we have the Lover. Ugh. The Lover I might have to put an F. I mean, let's read it together. So Lover's Kiss paralyzes for 10 seconds on touch and damages your own fatigue a bunch. 120. 10 seconds is a long time. In classic Oblivion, you would use it and you'd be out of fatigue, so it'd make you fall over and you'd lay down next to him. A lot of enemies resist paralyze later on, so like it's more of a gimmicky, fun, goofy thing to do. I've never used this more than on a goofy run playing around as like an RP thing. A lot of enemies don't stay down for 10 seconds. Like for whatever reason, it just doesn't work. It does grant you paralyzed, but so does that Birthsign stone. So it's not like you actually need it to get paralyzed early game. You can get the Doomstones right away at level 1. Yeah, you could argue this is C tier. I'm going to put it at F just to make my tier list look more spaced out evenly. Yeah, the Shadow's one use. That's got to be the worst one. The one use is if you are silenced, you can still go invisible. I don't know. Maybe that's got a use to you, but like the game is just too easy, super early game. Maybe if you're playing on Master too, and you're like, I need a way to escape, but that's what quick save is for. And Master, you just expect to die sometimes. Yeah, I think that's all I got. So, thanks for watching.